Okay, so today we're playing World War Z in 2025. This is a game that has been on my radar for a while, but I never really got a chance to play it until now. I remember when I made that Back for Blood video last year that became the most viewed video in the history of this channel. A lot of people were commenting on World War Z and talking about how I should play that game and see how it compares. And I'm like, World War Z, I've heard of it before. Obviously, I know the movie World War Z, and I knew there was a game that was tied into it, but I didn't really know too much else about it. I didn't know that it was a co-op game similar to Back for Blood and Left 4 Dead, of course. I mean, World War Z came out 2 years before Back for Blood, so it was definitely not inspired by Back for Blood. It was mostly inspired by Left 4 Dead and maybe a little bit of Days Gone. But that being said, Days Gone came out the same year as World War Z, so obviously World War Z is not a ripoff of Days Gone, because that was literally impossible for that to happen, to rip off a game that only came out a few months before. But that's basically the surface level explanation of what to expect with World War Z. It's Left 4 Dead and Days Gone put together in terms of the third-person gameplay, the horde, the way that the zombie horde behaves, and they all kind of like pile up on top of each other, and there's just a shit ton of zombies all coming at you at the same time. And the way that zombies act and behave is a lot different than any co-op zombie game you've ever played, whether we're talking about Left 4 Dead, Back for Blood, Killing Floor, or Call of Duty Zombies. This is definitely a much different experience for you. It's not just a generic copy and paste ripoff game. It has its own thing going for it, and I would recommend it in 2025 for anyone who's especially into zombie co-op experiences. It has the campaign story mode that you would expect in games like Left 4 Dead and Back for Blood, but it also has a horde mode, which I think is where the game truly shines. But regardless of which mode you decide to play, you'll be able to have no problem finding players in 2025. I mean, the game's only 6 years old, so that's not too surprising, and it has full crossplay support, so if you're on PlayStation, Xbox, or PC, it does not matter. Everyone can play together, which is a great thing to have, because if it's like, there are a lot of older games that are good, and that I would recommend, but for a lot of people who have friends that play on different platforms, it's not really a viable option for you if you don't have that crossplay. But good for you guys to know is that World War Z does, in fact, have full crossplay available to it. So that's great. And it doesn't matter what time of day you decide to play. Like, if you want to play with randoms and not your friends, you'll be able to find matches easily in most regions. I think if you live in Africa or South America, you're going to have a bit of a harder time finding matches. But most regions, the major regions in North America, Europe, even Asia and Oceania, you'll be able to find matches. I mean, on Steam alone, there's about 5,000 players. But then if you combine that with the people who still play on PlayStation and Xbox, it's pretty easy to be able to find people. It's definitely a lot easier on weekends and during peak hours in the late afternoon, early evening hours. So, like, if you're playing on a Monday at 1 o'clock in the morning, you'll still find a match. Like, it's still possible, but it's going to be obviously not as easy to find a match. Especially if you take into account, you know, if you live in a less populated area of the world that doesn't have as many players, or if you are trying to play a certain difficulty mode, because there are 4 or 5 different difficulty options in World War Z, so that splits the player base up, of course. I mean, you're obviously going to have the most amount of people playing on the highest difficulty, you're going to have a lot of people playing on the lowest difficulty, and then the other ones kind of vary. But all in all, I'd say it's worth giving a try. The campaign and story is not really very strong, and there's like such a huge roster of different characters, so it's not like Left 4 Dead, where you just have 4 characters specifically that were built up and developed, and you actually can form a connection with. These are just a bunch, like just a huge, wide roster of characters, kind of like Back for Blood, what they did with that. And yeah, you're not really invested in the storyline, and you're not playing for that. You're just playing to kill a shit ton of zombies, which this game does a pretty good job at allowing you to do. The gunplay feels satisfying enough. It feels a little bit clunky at times, like it definitely did lack a certain amount of polish. The first-person mode, I would don't get it, because it's a separate DLC from the base game. And in first person, this game plays like absolute dog shit. Trust me, just stick with third person and don't even bother with that. But when we're talking about the actual game, the way it's meant to be played in third person, yeah, the gunplay is very satisfying, and there's a lot of variety, weapon variety. The maps, I think, were designed pretty well. So, like, there's nothing I could really, like, say that stands out that I have to complain about this. Like, obviously, the story and the writing is just non-existent and not very important or vital to the experience. That's, like, the one major criticism, but otherwise, it's, like, not very offensive. Like, not, like, just, oh my god, they did so many horrible things. Like, why did this game exist? Why did they make it? It doesn't stand out too much on its own. It's not like, oh my god, this is, like, an amazing fucking game, 10 out of 10. I would say realistically it would be more like a 6.5, 7, maybe 7.5, depending on, like, especially if you have friends and people to play with. That obviously adds to the experience. But yeah, I would recommend it if you are into these types of games. If you're not really into, like, the whole like, zombie co-op thing, and that's not really your genre of game, then you're probably not going to really get much out of this. But I would say, yeah, especially if you can get it on sale. If you get a price on this game, and it usually is pretty cheap. I forget how much I got it for during the Steam sale. It was like, I'd like to say it was like $15 or maybe 10. Like, it was cheap. It was very, very cheap. So, for that price and kind of having an idea of what to expect, I think you'll get your money's worth and you'll enjoy your time with this game. It's still good 6 years later.